Social Security, the third rail of politics, something that groups like Concord and CRFB don't really shy away from because, frankly, they're topics that have to be discussed. But what did the trustees for Social Security have to say about the program right now? And are things getting worse even in the middle of this pandemic?
Okay, so on Social Security and Medicare, I'm going to give you the bad news, and then I'm going to give you the worst news.
Wait. No good news?
No good news here.
Come on, Mark. It's raining outside. I need some good news.
Last year, we actually had some good news in Social Security, which is that it turned out that people with disabilities were actually able to stay in the workforce. They were getting the support they needed. They were getting demand from their employers. And that was a big help, not only to Social Security, but to the economy and disabled workers. But that was last year. This year, I only have bad news and worse news. The bad news is the major trust funds are all within 15 years of insolvency under the trustees' projections. Medicare in 2026, that's just 6 years. Social Security in 2035, the sort of combined trust funds, 15 years. That means that somebody retiring today at the age of 62 will be 77 when they face a 21% across-the-board benefit cut. This is not something you need to fix for your grandkids. This is something you need to fix for your grandparents, or maybe for Bob.
Yeah.
and speaking of, Bob, you want to chime in with any remarks or questions on Social Security? You're closer than I am to receiving
let me really tell you the worst news, which is the worst news is the trustees' projections did not account for any of the effect of the current economic crisis, which at minimum is going to dramatically reduce payroll tax revenue for this year. More likely is going to reduce payroll tax revenue for a number of years, reduce interest rates, which is good for the debt but bad for Social Security's trust fund, and increase spending on Medicare. And when you add those things in, it's very likely that Social Security is going to run dry by 2030 or so.
Mark, I appreciate the sentiment, and I hope you and Chase and your offspring continue to contribute heavily to the Social Security Trust Fund. Well, I mean, you might say that some of the estimates in the trustees' report are optimistic. I could paint a pretty good case that they are being optimistic, which to me is more bad news because the numbers could actually be worse. Not only because of the pandemic that you mentioned, but there are there's a little bit in the weeds, but I think, as you know, they assume a pretty big comeback in fertility rate in the United States, which is one of the big drivers of the long term. But even more is on the Medicare side, the trustees are bound by some assumptions under current law that were written into past legislation that they openly say they don't think are achievable. Some goals for payment standards that they think the medical community won't be able to achieve. So I look at that and I say, you'll put the pandemic on top of this, the delay, as you mentioned, that we're going to be having in dealing with these programs, and some of the optimistic assumptions. And not to be too pessimistic, but I do think that the trustees' report ought to get a lot more attention than it does.
Well, so I understand this is a family program. I will say there are some theories that the fertility rate is about to go way up in light of the current lockdown.
That may be just a temporary.
So we may see a bit of a COVID boom.
I think
is that like the Super Bowl boom?
Just to take that point seriously, it is more likely to be the opposite effect because recessions tend to have a depressing effect, shall we say, on that type of productivity.
I'm also a little curious if the divorce rate's going to go up for this period of time.
Yeah, but
anyway, Mark,
you're right.
Ahead.
To the trustees' credit, they have some of the areas where I think that they were the most optimistic in past years. They're starting to revise. So, for example, they took down their inflation numbers, their interest rate numbers, their fertility rate numbers. They took all of them down, probably not as low as to where they should have, but they're moving in the right direction. Again, I think whatever optimism they have in general is now being swamped by the inherent optimism of not accounting for the effects of the coronavirus. I mean, we're going to see disability rolls swell. I wouldn't be surprised. I can say the Bipartisan Policy Center estimates that instead of running out of money in 2065, the disability program will run out of money in 2024. That's a 40-year advancement of the insolvency date. I've done my own numbers that say it's not quite that soon, but it could be 2025, 2026. These programs are not going to be in good shape post-coronavirus, even if these other assumptions do pan out. And in fact, as soon as we come out of this coronavirus crisis, I think right on our backs, we're going to see Highway Trust Fund is out of money. Medicare Trust Fund is within a year or so of out of money, and Social Security isn't far behind. And we're going to have to move fast to either save these programs or more pessimistically to abandon them and instead decide to sort of bail them out with general revenue.